Hi everyone, Mrs. Olson here. Today's lesson is creating a new government. Now, within the reading document for today's lesson, it's going to talk about bonds, which is what this video lesson is all about, how government bonds work. Before we get into the video lesson, let's look over the learning target, which says, explain how the United States established a central government and early economic policies. So to understand the learning target, I think it's important to really get a good grasp on what a bond is and how they work. It's always a good idea when you do these video lessons to take notes. Even though I'm not checking the notes today, I think it helps you to remember the information in the lesson. So here we go. Okay, first of all, what is a bond? And the definition is really that it's a paper note. It looks like actual money. So it's a paper note promising to repay money after a certain length of time. So you and I, we could go down to the bank right now and we could buy a bond, okay? And then we're going to be repaid that money after a certain length of time. And the reason why the definition says a certain length of time is because you buy bonds based on its monetary value. It could be $20, $50, $100, even more. So you buy that bond, okay? And then all of them have a time increment attached to it. So some might what they call mature in 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years. So after a certain amount of time, most often in years, then you're going to be repaid the money. Okay, so you should all be asking a question. Wait for it. Wait for it. Are you coming along the right question? Who's going to repay the money? Well, it's a government bond. The government, the United States government, promises to repay us that money. Okay? So, in here I said, or who did they borrow the money from? Once again, it's the American people. It's you and I. So we go down to the bank, we buy a bond, and the government promises that they're going to repay us back in 10 years, 20 years. It just depends on what type of bond we bought, okay? So here, let me move my screen just a little bit here. Here is an actual bond. So you can see that it is worth $100, okay? It does look like money. It says U.S. Savings Bond right here. All right, so they would put our name, our address. This would actually be our social security number here, okay? And then this is how they keep track. They're in different series. All right, move this back up really quickly. Okay, so that's the savings bond. And I'm wondering, do you guys recognize this? Have your parent persons ever said, oh yeah, so-and-so bought you bonds when you were born? Sometimes it's a traditional gift that some people give to babies when they're born. Like example, my mom bought them, I had an uncle, and I think my grandpa bought them for me when I was a baby, when I was born. My mom held on to them until I went to college, and then I was able to cash them in, and I bought books with them. Okay, so I'm going to move my picture here. It says, why does the government sell bonds? Anybody have an idea? Well, there we go. The government sells bonds as a way to make money when they don't have enough to pay for whatever it is that they need to pay for. So when our government is fighting a war, or perhaps they have debt to other nations, they've borrowed money from other countries and they have to repay them, the government will then sell bonds to the American people, and essentially it's an IOU. Okay, American people, buy bonds so that you can help us out, and in 10, 20, 30 years, we'll pay you back. Okay? So in the reading, you have either read or you are going to read that during the Revolutionary War, when we were trying to get away from Britain, the government pushed people to buy bonds because we needed to be able to finance the war and beat Great Britain. Okay? I said put this in your pocket for future reference because the US is going to sell bonds again. No doubt. So this big graphic is just, hopefully it's kind of a big message that says, here's Uncle Sam that represents the US government. I want your money. So once again, the US government sells bonds when they have to finance something, when they have to generate some money. Okay? And I'll move my little picture window up so you can see the rest of the graphic. And it's usually because they don't have enough to be able to pay for what they need to pay for. Okay? All right. So we've already said this, but I think it's important to understand who buys the bonds, and that is the American people, you and I. Okay? Let's move this again. Always seems to be in the way. How do they get their money back? Well, when the government makes more money in the future, then they can pay the people back. So remember that the term is matures. When that bond matures, then the government promises to pay back the money. Okay? So each bond matures after a certain amount of years. It could be 10, it could be 20 years. Okay? And you get paid what the bond is worth plus interest. So what happens is, say we go to buy a bond that is worth $100. When we go down to the bank, we're actually paying about $50 for that $100 bond. And in 10 or 20 years, whenever that bond matures, the government promises to pay us back $100 plus a little bit of interest. So it depends on how the stock market is doing. There is a percentage. And so let's say that the bond matures in 10 years. If we cash it in after 15 years, we're going to be paid back $100 plus a little bit more with interest. Now, if you try to cash in a bond before it matures, you're not going to get, say, that $100 back. Okay, so this last note on this page says interest is a percentage on top of what the amount is worth. So if you know anything about loans and kind of bonds fit into this, interest is a percentage that's added on to whatever that amount happens to be. Okay. So, oh, my graphics are out of order a little bit today. So here's the example that I just talked about. Let's pretend we bought a savings bond that is worth $100. We would actually buy it for $50. Okay. The bond matures. We are able to cash it in. So it'll be worth $100 plus interest. And it depends on what interest rates are at the time you cash it in. It might be $110, it might be $120, maybe it's worth even more. Okay? There are savings bonds calculator that you can just Google, you can search for them, and you type in the series number. Remember, at the top right corner of that savings bond, there's a series number. You type that in and it'll tell you about what your bond is going to be worth. So I'm going to move my window down just slightly so you can see this graphic right here. Okay. And I'm going to go to the next slide, but if you really want to look at the graphic, you can pause it and take a look even further. Okay, so I thought this was kind of a fun graphic that illustrates how the bonds work. It says buy U.S. savings bond for a rainy day. So for example, my savings bonds that I was given as a baby, as like a welcome to the world present, my mom saved for me, and then when I was in college and I needed to buy college textbooks, which are really expensive, she gave me this savings bond so that I could pay for my books. Okay, that is the end of the how do U.S. government bonds work. Hopefully it's given you a better idea of how they work, and what Hamilton was trying to do in the 1700s now makes a little bit more sense. All right, guys, talk to you later. Bye.